The year is 1600. You stand on a muddy, fog-covered battlefield, surrounded by thousands of warriors. Your focus narrows to the man at your shoulder. In this era, a trusted ally could draw his sword and end the war before the enemy even reaches the front line. Surviving this single, chaotic day of paranoia and blood was the only path forward for a warlord to become the absolute ruler of the nation. To understand how Japan reached this breaking point, we have to look at the geopolitical reality of the mid-1500s. This map of feudal Japan shows dozens of fragmented, multicolored territories. The old shogunate, the military government that historically held the real power, had completely collapsed, fracturing the nation into a massive civil war controlled by regional feudal lords known as daimyos. What followed was an era of constant attrition. Japan became a massive meat grinder, where rival daimyos threw armies at one another for decades, fighting over every province and castle town in pursuit of absolute dominance. By the late 1500s, a century of this relentless warfare had depleted the resources of the great houses and exhausted the regional lords. In this vacuum of power, the advantage shifted toward tacticians who were willing to look beyond traditional siege warfare to secure a more permanent control. Every warrior operating in this society, like the one who wore this imposing red mask and rigid armor, was bound by a foundational, non-negotiable law, the samurai code of Bushido, or the way of the warrior. Bushido dictated every action a samurai took. It demanded unwavering courage on the battlefield, absolute honor above personal ambition, and an unbreakable loyalty to your regional lord. As you can see from the lethal edge of this unsheathed katana, the consequences for failing that code were deeply personal and severe. Surrender was considered a disgrace far worse than death. A true samurai facing defeat was expected to commit seppuku, a formal ritual suicide, rather than endure the humiliation of capture. This rigid, suicidal adherence to the lord meant that a single act of betrayal could ripple through an entire army. For the man who intended to rule all of Japan, the challenge was finding the precise crack in that armor of honor. The path to unification began with Oda Nobunaga. He was a brilliant, ruthless visionary who made the first real attempt to consolidate Japan by abandoning the traditional rules of engagement. Looking at the brass firing mechanisms of these antique matchlock rifles, you can see the technological shift Nobunaga leveraged. While his rivals stuck to swords and traditional cavalry, Nobunaga integrated early firearms and unconventional tactics, conquering half of Japan and seizing the imperial capital by 1570. He was on the verge of total unification until the summer of 1582. While resting at a temple with a small retinue of roughly 30 guards, Nobunaga was jolted awake by the sudden sound of heavy cannon fire. The force attacking him was massive, 13,000 men, but they did not belong to a rival clan. They were commanded by Akechi Mitsuhide, Nobunaga's own highly trusted general. Recognizing he was entirely surrounded and cut off from escape, Nobunaga adhered strictly to the warrior code. He retreated deep into the burning temple and committed seppuku. Nobunaga's sudden death demonstrated that even decades of meticulous planning could be dismantled by the ambition of a single subordinate, leaving a dangerous opening for a new leader to exploit that exact vulnerability. Fast forward to the year 1600. The man in this portrait, Tokugawa Ieyasu, steps into that power vacuum. He marches his forces, the Eastern Army, out to face a massive enemy coalition at the Battle of Sekigahara. This tactical map shows the situation Tokugawa walked into. His blue units were outnumbered and pushed into the bottom of a valley. The red units of the Western Army held the high ground on the mountains, boxing him into a textbook hammer and anvil trap. But Tokugawa had prepared a failsafe beneath the physical battlefield. He secretly sent letters to red units on the perimeter, promising massive land grants and wealth if those generals abandoned the coalition and switched sides mid-fight. The entire battle hinged on a young enemy general named Kobayakawa. He was positioned on a dominant hill with thousands of fresh troops. As Tokugawa took heavy losses in the valley, he desperately needed Kobayakawa to act on the secret deal. But the young general froze in indecision, watching the slaughter below and refusing to move. Tokugawa executed a terrifying move to break the deadlock. He ordered his own gunners to unleash a direct blast of musket fire, right at Kobayakawa's position on the hill, turning his weapons on his supposed ally to force a decision. The shock tactic worked. Panicked by the fire from the man he was supposed to join, Kobayakawa finally ordered his thousands of men to charge down the mountain, bypassing Tokugawa entirely and smashing straight into the exposed flank of his own allies in the Western Ani. This volley of friendly fire served as a masterstroke of psychological manipulation. By firing on his own conspirator, Tokugawa forced Kobayakawa to commit to the betrayal immediately or face destruction on the hill. You can see the sheer chaos of that moment reflected in this antique screen painting. That singular, massive internal betrayal completely shattered the physical formations of the Western Army. The psychological blow was even more severe. In a society where the Bushido code of strict loyalty meant everything, watching your own flank suddenly turn their weapons on you created a total breakdown of morale that could not be recovered. The Western Army broke and fled. Tokugawa Ieyasu secured a total victory, unifying the fractured territories into the Tokugawa Shogunate and initiating 2.5 centuries of relative national peace. This specific moment in history, defined by intense maneuvering and fragile alliances, continues to serve as the bedrock for modern epics like the show Shogun. Tokugawa unified Japan because he knew a single secret letter or a well-timed volley of musket fire could be more effective than 1,000 katanas. He didn't just defeat an army, he gambled that under enough pressure, even the most disciplined loyalty has a breaking point.